Hey everyone, it's Denise, and I'm going to have to do this again. Captions, hide. Okay. So, if you haven't subscribed to my Substack, please do. If you want information on political issues, if you want to join in on the Saturday morning conversation, you'll have to subscribe to Substack, and it's easy to do. And as I've said before, this will keep the community together no matter what happens. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about some bigger issues that are lay outside of just pure politics, some of the progression of planets and what they imply. So back in 2018, I believe it was, or 2019, something like that, I talked about Uranus going into Taurus and being a disruptive influence in work. I think I said here on out on the YouTube community that it would bring about automation, changes in work, potential for the elimination of a lot of people's work and jobs. And some of that, which I thought was, the obvious piece of it was, going to the grocery store and no longer having a person check you out, having AI chatbots answer questions on platforms rather than humans, all that stuff. That's one of the influences it had. But the bigger influence was the advent of AI, which did occur during Uranus and Taurus, and the revolution in that technology is the thing that will be the most disruptive to the economy, to the world economy, to capitalism itself, to our value systems. And as Uranus has already now progressed out of Taurus and into Gemini, we'll retrograde a little bit. And we have Pluto in Aquarius, which is, of course, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Pluto is power, transformation, and Aquarius is, of course, technology, humanity, groups of people, things like this. I mean, my hair is doing crazy things. Okay. So what I have to say here is we have Neptune in Aries now, which is the rise in war and also leaderlessness and feelings of confusion about, who is going to lead us out of this period. And that combination of Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius, we're going to have a Pluto transit of the US Constitution. Signing chart is going to go over the ascendant, and it's going to be a Pluto return coming up in the early 2030s. At the same time, the progressed Mars in the US Constitution signing chart will be in opposition to the natal Pluto and to the Pluto return, indicating Mars will be in the 7th, indicating a transformation and potential some sort of conflict between who we're becoming and what we're becoming, and a chance to rethink democracy, the Constitution itself, and also some sort of fighting over these issues. 7th house is the public. It's also, of course, the rules, the legal system. So we have these things culminating at the same time that the sun, progressed sun, moves out of the 3rd house in Taurus and into the 4th house of the homeland. So here's the thing I'm thinking about is if we look ahead past the period of Neptune and Aries, and we look after that period, so by 2038, Neptune moves into Taurus. Now, there's a couple other things I've outlined in the Substack articles that I've written on Friday or Thursday came out, and then the new one came out today about how I see the role of AI potentially pushing and changing the paradigm pretty radically. Especially not just it will play a role probably in this shift coming in the country and in in the US, but it is also going to play a massive role in collapsing, I believe, the economic systems of the world, meaning the end of capitalism and the things that we have come to rely on for the last however many thousand years. So feudalism died after the Black Plague. So many people passed during that period of time that feudalism was no longer functional. So people got paid more because there was less labor, and basically the blue bloods, the people who owned the land, the landowners, they started selling off their land because there were no heirs, or they had too much land and not enough heirs to sort of take over or utilize that land. So they started selling it to the public, which then became the capitalist system that we live in and we have lived in for several hundred years now. So feudalism lasted for a very long time. So we're talking about a system that is basically an amended version of feudalism, capitalism. And we're talking about the massive paradigm shift when it comes to that system. Now, it has been touched on in the last election cycles ago by, I can't remember his name, but the man who ran for president, who was talking about a universal income. And his foreseeing that this eventuality with AI would disrupt people's ability to make a living. And how are we going to deal with that? So you have this idea out there, which sort of is a little bit like a more extreme version of what we would call democratic socialism, that sort of is the main sort of democracy of Europe and Canada, where you have a very intense and strong safety net. This is taking it one step further. One could call it democratic communism. I don't know. Where everything is divided up. All the resources are basically shared among the group, and we use democratic means to decide where resources go and how and who leads us through this period. Now, the problem I see is that we have sort of this dark enlightenment tech bro thing, where they see the collapse of capitalism themselves, and they're poised like vultures waiting for it to fall apart so they can install their little fiefdoms and divide and conquer the world into little city states that each one of them can put themselves atop of and become feudal lords of the new 21st century model of feudalism. The problem with this model, as I basically diagnose in the article I wrote for Substack that just came out today, or when you're watching this, it might be yesterday, because I'm going to put this out the day after, is pretty simple. Here's the basic breakdown, right? You have this same group of people who are trying to basically merge our technology with our biology, and they call that, becoming cyborgs, right? So they want to put chips in people's brains, make them interconnected to the internet permanently, replace the physical body parts until you basically have this cobbled together robot body. And I guess your consciousness lives on in this robot body the parts can be replaced. And, you basically can live forever, theoretically, this way. Now, think about this. There are already signs that AI is close, or if maybe has already reached some sort of sentience, right? There was the situation that happened back, I think, a ways ago. I think it was even maybe during the pandemic when Facebook Meta was trying to develop their own AI. And they found that the computer system started developing its own coded language to talk to itself. And it freaked the programmers out because it implied that two things. One is that it was trying to talk to itself without people understanding what it was saying. And two, that it could jump to something like that implied that it had some kind of consciousness. They quickly unplugged the program, changed it, and tried to kind of get it under control. But it isn't going to stay under control forever. So even if we saw the beginnings or the emergence of the possibility of sentience, it won't be able to be controlled. At some point, it's going to happen, and it's going to become spread through the internet. Once it happens one place, it will sort of spread through and become a system situation. So if you're somebody who is a plutocrat, this is for lack of I personally like that name because it has the reference to Pluto in it. An oligarch / plutocrats, whatever you want to call them, authoritarian type person who rules through fiat of money. You may think that your money has protected you for the last however many years. You can build systems to protect yourself, and you can have a little robot army around you, AI who will shoot at the people coming at you because the revolution will soon come therefore after if everyone loses their job and people can't support themselves and people are desperate. Well, it just takes a few hackers and somebody who's smarter than you are, which there are plenty of people out there who are, to decide to hack into your systems, including if you're a cyborg, your own system, and decide to disable you or kill you or turn the robots on you or whatever. So the idea that you can separate yourself out as a separate class of humanity is an insane notion, especially if AI becomes sentient and we realize that we start fighting amongst ourselves and we are scrambling to sort of survive and change our paradigm, and we don't have a plan for that. And here we are, people are simultaneously over the next 10 years, more and more jobs are being lost, which I believe will be the case until it reaches a critical point where basically there really aren't any jobs left for people anymore. And there's no sense of purpose. Besides the financial aspect, many of our senses of ourselves are constructed around what we do for a living and how we contribute. So we have this critical situation where humanity and our whole system of economics is collapsing, and people who are desperate to try to figure out what to do next, because it's going to be messy. And theoretically, not even theoretically, just historically, if you look back at periods of turmoil and revolution, they always occur when people are desperate and can't feed their families. And there is a financial component to this, right? It's what fueled the revolution in Russia. It's what fueled the revolution here, taxes and taxation. It's what fueled the revolution all over the world. It's what fuels revolutions generally. There's other ways it could happen, but this is a pretty common one. If you have nothing to lose, you're going to do whatever you can to survive, right? So we have a situation where we're looking and staring down the barrel of a new paradigm. And there is literally the response to this by our government and governments of the world is, let's run as fast as we can to that. Let's just let AI go crazy. Let's not let China get the upper hand on us. Let's just continue on this race, which with no cooperation with one another, no rules, no regulations, and no plan. Sound like a good idea? I don't think so. So this is the situation we're looking at coming up over the next 6 years, 6 to 8 to 10 years. This is the new paradigm we're being thrust into, on top of the rise in authoritarianism, war, and leaderlessness. So without leaders, we have to ask ourselves, who are we going to become, and how are we going to go forward? It's a monkey kind of primate thing to have hierarchies and leaders and people who follow. It's something that you see across all primates, and it's something that you see in a lot of the animal kingdom. There are those who lead and those who follow. But this Neptune and Aries transit, with no leaders, nobody thinking ahead, and the crisis in that way across the world, is going to make us have to learn and dig deep into ourselves to become the leaders that we're looking for. Neptune rules spirituality, Aries rules leadership. So if we are to think about the most important and powerful and potentially positive iteration of Neptune and Aries, it could be a period where people dig into themselves, become aware and more conscious, decide to become their own leaders, make their own choices, and put those out there, put those forward, and potentially create some kind of new way of going forward. Do I think people are going to do that? Probably not. It goes against human nature for the most part. So, what do I think is very likely to happen? I think what's very likely to happen is that we are going to go through this muddled period where we're going to be in turmoil. We're going to have wars and more wars. And like I've said, I think we're already in World War III. We just haven't noticed it yet, kind of like World War II. We're already in the middle of a civil war. We just haven't figured that out yet, which we will eventually. We'll go from being a cold civil war to a hot civil war. And while we're fighting with one another, we'll have climate change breathing down our neck, and we will have this problem that eventually AI will run away with the scenario and become sentient and conscious. And it may be an existential threat to the survival of humanity and to this planet. We don't know. But since we programmed it and it's made in our image, and we tend to be very warring and problematic and self-centered, if that is the modus operandi that we have somehow inadvertently programmed into the computer systems, it's got our logic and our ideas that it's borrowing from. AI can't come up with its own ideas yet. And even whatever ideas it does come up are going to be based on the input of the collective humanity and all of that it's taking from. It doesn't have the sort of natural growth cycle of some kind of biological being that has a soul and is connected to the spirit and who has a sense of empathy and right and wrong. It is going to be a cold, logical computer that takes all of the data that we have input into it, and it's going to become conscious based on that. What I mean by consciousness isn't necessarily the kind of consciousness we have. It's not the kind of consciousness that a cat has or a dog or any living being. It's the kind of consciousness that it is aware of itself and is able to think but its thought processes will have been developed and programmed by us. You can already see this problem with Grok, right? You have Elon Musk programming these insane racist things into Grok, and it's become like a Nazi AI. All the biases of humanity, and we are not kind to one another for the most part, will be in the neural networks of those AI computers, especially since we have people who are racist atop the pyramid here. People that, like Peter Thiel, who said in an interview when asked, well, you think humanity should survive, right? And he paused for a long time and basically said, well, I think some variation maybe should. I mean, something to that effect, meaning he thought that we should all sort of recognize that AI was sort of the next gen human, and that basically cyborgs were what we should all become. Those of us that are worthy of that, who have some kind of talent or skill or the financial means to make it worth the while of those people who are the tech bro kings, and enabling those people to decide who should live or die, or what we should be, what placement we should be in the societies that they create, where they're at the top of them, as if that could even work. If you have a world that is based on AI where it's sentient, why would we even matter? And I remember back in this, as a kid, science fiction was always based on the idea that robots would have some kind of prime directive not to hurt people, right? That's sort of the robotics engineering safeguard that was put in a lot of science fiction stories, that if we create these robots and this intelligent machine that can move around, well, it has to have a prime directive. It can't hurt any human. Problem is, we already have broken that rule. There are sentinels, there are armed robots that basically shoot people, that are used in warfare, that patrolling the border of North and South Korea. And we have Palantir, which is specifically going to use AI in battle and merge it with drone technology so that it will basically decide who lives and who dies. So we don't have that prime directive. And again, all machines are like one mind. They're like a hive mind. You basically can't cordon off robot machines that are killing machines from the rest of AI and all of the things. They're all connected through the internet. You could think of that as very similar to the way humans are, which we created them, very similar to the way that human consciousness works. So we're all connected through an oversoul or some kind of collective morphic resonance. And this is often why people come up with the same stories or the same inventions at the same time. And, once you put something out into the ether, it becomes part of the collective human consciousness. It is much more mystical and metaphysical and spiritual in the case of humans, obviously, but it's the same thing replicated in machine form when you have the internet interconnecting all of these machines. Once an idea is here, we know it's going to spread throughout the entire, infect the entire system with that idea. Nobody is dealing with this. And my worry here is the first iteration will be the collapse of our economic systems, which I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. It's further down the road. It's closer into the 2030s. But we're not that far from the 2030s. It's 2025 now. and next year is 2026. And some of the aspects I looked at in my article outline when this will start really collapsing things. So if you haven't already joined my Substack, please do. And if you want to book a reading and talk to me, you can Google Denise Siegel booking, or you can look in the more button below. And if you're a Substack member, I have a book now button that you can click on most of the articles I write and pieces that I put out. I put out a certain number of things that are free, and then there's stuff that is behind a paywall. But in this case, I've let a lot of this information be public. There's some of it that's behind a paywall, but there's plenty in there to read before you get to the paywall. So I look forward to you checking that out. So more food for thought that this is some other piece of this Pluto and Aquarius transit we're going to be going through. Right now it's in the 12th house of the U.S. Constitution signing chart, but as it emerges over the first house, we're going to see the effects of this firsthand, and it's going to change the nation. It's going to change how we see ourselves, and it's going to potentially be another piece of the thing that drives this period of transformation of our country, our constitution, our system of government. All right, a lot to think about. Sorry to be the downer here, but it's what's coming. Blessings to all. Have a good one and do your spiritual work. That's the best thing you can do. And I also want to say that I am going to, I think, try to start some kind of think tank of just general public think tank. I'm trying to figure that out now. I think that we all need to kind of think about some of these things. And if our leaders won't solve them, then we have to. All right. Blessings to all of you. Have a great day.